friends. Welcome back. Today is a exciting day for me. Today, instead of me sharing with you about becoming victorious in Christ, I have a new and dear friend that's coming on, and God kind of put her in my life at a really cool time. And the more I got to know her, and the more I fellowshipped with her and her husband, we began to learn more about her and her past. And it wasn't a mistake that God put her in our path. Her and her husband started coming to our church, and she began to face some things in her past, and God's given her victory. So I asked her, or actually, she asked me, and we talked about it. She said, I want to share my story. And I said, you know what? I think that'd be a great idea, because there's probably a lot of women out there that can really relate to what my friend Lynn's going to say. So I hope you guys watch and be encouraged, because she's going to share not only her story, but she's going to share with you the victory that she's got in her life. So I want to invite her to be with us. I love modern technology. We can do this, but this is my friend Lynn. And hey, Lynn.
Hi.
All right. I'm going to ask Lynn to just share a little bit about her story. Okay, go ahead, Lynn. Share with us about your story.
Well, first of all, let me say thanks for letting me come on. I've spent my entire life hiding this story. So for me to tell it, it's kind of nerve-wracking. So I am a child of divorce. My parents split when I was 6. A couple years later, the divorce was final. So that meant that I lived between 2 houses, 2 sets of rules. And once the split happened, my dad began to tell me that he could not love me because I looked like my mother. And so he would intentionally do things, say things. He never sexually molested me. He never physically hit me. But his words and his actions were very intentional, very harmful, and very hurtful. By the time I was 9, I cussed like a sailor. I was a little bit of a class bully. And my mother saw me winding out of control. And we had met a new preacher at our church. The old one had left, and the new preacher had come, and he had taken an interest in my mom, my sister, and myself because he saw that what the divorce was doing to all 3 of us. And he began to mentor her, and he began to challenge her. And in the process, my grandparents also attended that church, and my papa ran that church. And in the process, the new preacher did not back down, and he wanted to run the church, according to God's way, not according to man's way. So my papa did not like it. He felt threatened, and he took him and my mama with them, along with all of my extended family. They left our church, and my mother decided to stay because what the new preacher was teaching was something totally different than she had ever learned before, and she knew that it was true and that it was real. And because she decided to stay, her parents ostracized her, and she became the black sheep of the family. So along this time, God was working in my heart, and I got saved at the age of 9. I quit cussing like a sailor. I quit pushing people around. But it was also very difficult because there were times when my mother, she worked as hard as she could, made as much money as she could. But there were times, every single paycheck, she gave her tithe, she paid her bills. And a lot of times there was not food. I mean, there was not money for food and for bills. So there were times that we went hungry. And there's one time in particular that we had one canned good in our cupboard, and we had a food pounding at our church. And my mother said, go get the food out of the cupboard and we're going to take it. Well, my sister and I, we pitched a fit. We didn't understand because we knew we were hungry. And that was the last can to. And then after that, the new preacher called us back to the fellowship hall, and for 3 months worth of groceries, and we were no longer hungry for a little bit. And God had provided for our needs. And, in the meantime, my dad, he was, eating high on the hog. He would have steak and baked potato a lot. And he didn't care that we were hungry. He didn't care that we didn't have food. And it was just very rough. And I grew up hating my dad. I was very bitter towards my dad for probably over 20 years. And anytime someone would bring up his name, my whole demeanor would just instantly change. And when Mark and I got married, our very first fight was over my dad. And he told me I should send my dad a Father's Day card. And I told him that I couldn't. But at the time, Mark did not know the whole story. He knows the whole story now. But Dad has had a major influence on my life. And probably when I was 10 or 11, he made me drink and smoke. And he laughed at me when we got choked. And he made fun of us. You know, my sister was there too. He made her do it also. And he just made life miserable. And he kept telling me every day that I would see him, he couldn't love me because I look like my mother. So fast forward to, I don't know, high school. I was supposed to graduate in June. He comes to my house in May. And he's told me my entire life that he would pay for school, that he would, help me further my education. Well, he knocks on the door and, at that May, I graduate, 3 or 4 weeks later. And he tells my mother that he will not pay for my college because I look like my mother. But in the end, God gets the glory because when I went to school, I had received over $2,400 cash for graduation. And then I had gotten grants and scholarships throughout my college career. And I came out owing only $500 for a 4-year education. So God has provided for me for my whole life. But it wasn't, and this whole journey of living life with my dad, it's at its, very ups and downs, so to speak. And I've tried to forgive him, and I've tried to do different things, and I've tried to make amends with him for stuff that I was not even responsible for, but he never allowed us to have a relationship. And so fast forward to about a year and a half ago, I learned that he was sick. And he's just recently been moved to a nursing home for dementia about a month ago. And when I met you, Linda, Cousin Bailey had invited us to come. And the very first Sunday that I met you, you had a Sunday school lesson on digging up your roots. So the very first time that I met you, I bawled like a baby because I felt like that lesson was for me. And this whole series on healing your hurts, it has spoken to me this entire time. And so that's why I'm here. So I don't know.
I am so proud of you, Lynn. Wow. It takes a lot of courage to come live on Facebook and YouTube and share your story, especially a story that you've hidden. So many of us hide the hurt things in our past. We want everybody to think we're okay. And for you, I remember you telling me, of course, we had to condense this. There's a lot more, but for this broadcast. But I remember you, and maybe some of you mothers right there, and maybe you're the single mom. Maybe you're going through this, and you have a child that's struggling. Lynn had told me that one thing that she needed as a child was to play basketball. And that's how she got her That's how she got her venting for her father. Is that not right, Lynn? How'd you do that when you were little?
Yeah, that's totally correct. So my mother had the foresight to understand that both my sister and I needed to be able to vent on our own. And we were both involved in team sports, but team sports didn't always meet that need. So she got one of her brothers to come and install a basketball goal. And I drove by the house that I grew up in not too long ago. My basketball goal is still there. But I would shoot hoops late into the night. The neighbors all knew when I was out there for hours that something was up because they understood that things were not good with my dad. And as a matter of fact, one of our next door neighbor, we moved into the house that I grew up in right around Christmas time. And we knew that we were not going to have a Christmas that year. And that next door neighbor, he came over with a live Christmas tree. Wow. And then he brought a fruit basket and 2 presents. And he gave the fruit basket to my mother, and he gave the 2 presents to my sister and myself. And I don't remember what was in that present. I just remember that was the only thing that we had gotten for Christmas that year. And Mom had taken some yarn. She's very crafty. She sews all the time. And she had gotten some yarn that she had packed up from Dad's house, and she crocheted snowflakes. And so that year, our whole tree was nothing but crocheted snowflakes. And to this day, every Christmas, I have crocheted snowflakes on my tree, and I've had to spray paint them because they were so old, because it's the first set that my mama made. And then she went back and made me another set about 10 years ago. And she said that would be the last set that she made for me. So I guess I have to spray paint them from now until the day that I die. But I put them up on my tree every year as a reminder that God does protect us and he does take care of us. And every time I
Yes.
look at them, my kids make fun of me, but I'm like, no, we cannot do without the snowflakes. We have to have them on that tree.
Yes. I think what speaks to me in that is people need to be aware of how they make, you don't remember what people give you necessarily, and you don't remember things, but you do remember how people make you feel. And you didn't forget that gentleman. And I think that's cool. If God lays on your heart to do something, you need to do it, especially when it's, you just don't know the impact. I mean, I'm sure he didn't realize that, 20 or 30 years later, you would be mentioning him on YouTube.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
he and his wife have both passed away, and they were precious, precious people. And we kept in contact with them through the years and stuff. And it was just a blessing to know that God provided, and
That's so cool.
yeah. And I mean, another thing, the house that I grew up in, the landlord let my mom rent that house for 13 years for $90 a month. And it was like a 1,200 square foot house. He knew that my mom was trying the best that she could. And he felt that that's what he needed to do. So that's what he did.
Wow. And that, man, it's so
Yeah.
cool. You can look back and see God's hand on your life, even in those
Yes.
horrible times.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. What Lynn didn't tell you is that in her hometown, because of her extended family and the divorce and all, she and her sister and mom were really looked down upon and treated horribly. And to grow up not only with your father treating you like that, but with people in the community, it was hard. That was in your family, I guess you could say. And how she's overcome all that is just crazy for me. It's just awesome with God's help. So about a month ago, or no, a little over a month ago, Lynn came to me and realized that she needed to go and see her daddy. Would you like to tell them you come to realize that you need to dig up your roots and in order to get victory, and we needed to go, and you needed to go see your dad and tell him and talk to him. And that was the day I don't think I'll ever forget. It was a pretty cool day. So why don't you share what happened that day, Lynn?
So, like I said earlier, my dad has gotten dementia, and he has cut my sister and myself out of the will, which I've never cared about, whatever. But as part of that process, my cousin is the executor of his estate. He's his healthcare power of attorney. And so I have been in contact with my cousin, and my cousin gives me periodic updates on what's going on. So as part of that update process, he told me that my dad's caregiver wanted to speak to me. And I told him that would be fine. So he gave me her number, and I called her one day while I was at work. And 45 minutes later, I told her that I would come and see him one last time, because she told me that she had a box of stuff that had my mom, my dad, myself, and my sister. And in that box, it was a whole lot of stuff that I had never seen, including a picture of the four of us when we were all happy. And so at the time, I didn't know that. And she told me, she said, well, if you want to come, I don't have to be there. I'll leave the box outside. You can come pick it up. And then, just go in and see your dad and just kind of see what's going on. And I said, okay. So I texted Landa, and I told you that, I just asked if you would pray for him, and you volunteered to go with me. And that hit me in the soft spot, because normally people don't do that. So your kindness was very appreciated that day. So I met you at your house, and Cousin Bailey also went with us, and you prayed for me that day. You helped me have the courage, because I had not been inside his house since I was a teenager, and I knew that I could not go in there first. So we pull up in his driveway. I went ahead and got the box out of the van, put it in my car, just in case he would not let me in, which has happened many times before. And while I'm putting the box in the car, he's staring at me, and in my mind, I knew I was getting ready to get cussed at, fussed at, whatever. But anyway, we rang the doorbell. He came to the door, and Landa, you went in first. So thank you so much, because I couldn't do it. And I borrowed your confidence to go through that day, because I could not do it. It was truly a God thing. But anyway, so you entered, and then I was second. And he looked at you, he looked at me, he looked at Cousin Bailey, and he didn't recognize y'all. But for whatever reason, he recognized me. And he invited us in. We were there maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And I couldn't do any kind of small talk. And so there again, thank you for taking the lead, because I couldn't do it. And then eventually I just said, "Hey, Dad." And he looked at me and he said, "Yes." And I said, "I forgive you for everything."
Yeah.
And when I told him that, he got teary-eyed.
Yeah.
And to me, it looked like he was trying to mouth the words, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
But all he could get out was "I'm." And then he got very confused. And I gave him a hug, and I told him I loved him, and I left. And then we went to go undo that whole box of pictures, and it included my parents' wedding album. It included pictures I had never seen before. It included military documents, because he was in the Air Force. It was just very much of an overwhelming day that needed to happen. And I appreciate you going with me, because I couldn't have done it. I couldn't. So thank you.
Oh, it was my pleasure to see the Jesus in you come out and get forgiveness. Yeah. And from that day, that was the day. So she began to dig out her roots. She came face to face with what she had to do. And that was not an easy thing at all. And she went and forgave her dad. And then, man, God began to pour out in her life everything that we've been talking about. She's been digging into the Word, and she was already in the Word, but digging in the Word and being in church and just seeking God and wanting to be used, wanting to take this horrible thing that God did. I mean, not God, the horrible thing that Satan meant for horrible, evil, and turn it into what God can do. And not only did God give her a little girl to encourage, and a single mom that was similar. God says some pretty great things in your life since then. What can you say about God since then, Lynn? Since you asked your dad told your dad you forgave him.
So God has showed up in several ways. You mentioned the little girl and her mom. I have not met the little girl yet, but I have talked to her mom on several occasions. We've gone out for breakfast, and our stories are very similar. And I told her I would help her as much as I could, although I don't feel worthy, but I would try to help her. And she's helped me to see the viewpoint of my mother, because I've always viewed everything as a child, not as an adult, because things happened when I was, so young. So not only has that happened, my daughter has gotten saved, and that's a very big blessing. She went forward at church camp when she was younger. And then in the midst of an argument with her, I just felt like God led me to ask her, "Are you a Christian?" And when I did, the whole conversation changed. We started talking, and she accepted Christ as her Savior the next day. So thank you again, Landa.
Oh, no.
You did it again. So thank
No.
you again.
The cool thing is that your daughter saw the difference in you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the cool thing. That God had given you such victory, and she's seen others who had victory. And that's what draws people to Christ, is that victorious living that only Christ can give you, the peace that only Christ can give you, right?
Right.
That makes a difference in everything that we do, is what Christ can do. Precious family. Lynn has a precious family. Lynn, do you have peace today that you didn't have a year ago?
Oh, totally. Totally. And I've always known that I need to forgive my dad, and I always thought that I had forgiven him, but something about saying it out loud just makes it totally different, and actually telling him face to face, it just changed my whole perspective. And this is the freest I have ever been in my almost 47 years.
Wow.
So,
it's like what we talked about earlier in one of the lessons. When you say "I forgive you" to that person, what you're doing is you're cutting that bond, that hold that they have on you. It's over.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah.
It's over. At that point, Christ takes over, and He'll take care of them because you're His precious child. Wow, I so appreciate you giving your story, Lynn. Um, I just do. You're a blessing, and I know God's going to use you and continue to use you because He is using you at work and in our church and everywhere and here. I know He's going to continue using you in your obedience, because with obedience comes blessing. And I thank you so much, sweetheart. And so, you guys who are watching and you are part of this series that you've been watching, maybe you're like Lynn. Maybe, maybe you just need to forgive. Maybe you're still in the digging the roots out stage. Maybe you're trying to figure out what you need to do. Maybe you're still searching the scriptures and letting the balm of Gilead and the ointment of Christ and who He is speak to your heart. Wherever you are in this journey, know this: only God can give you the peace that you so desire. And only God can free you from the bitterness. And only God can make that eternal difference in your life. Thank you for tuning in tonight. You're a blessing to me. Hope to see you next week.